Newly obtained documents the Center Square Enterprise and Investigation Units found raises substantial questions about how attorneys general across the country coordinated with each other to go after President Donald Trump months before he was the nominee. In what appeared to be called Project for Federal Accountability, nearly 24 state attorneys general banded together as early as April 2024 to plot litigation against Trump. Joining us to delve deeper into this story is one of the Center Square's EIU reporters. On top of this, investigative reporter Adam Herbets. Adam, there's a lot of layers to this onion, and I imagine we're going to be hearing a lot more about the different ways this story is going to go. But let's start with how the investigative team came across this project, or the rule of law working group, as you guys have found.
Yeah, this Project for Federal Accountability nickname was one of the very few things that was left unredacted on a batch of emails that my colleague TJ was able to obtain from the state of Washington and their attorney general's office. Now, the AG there talked on President Trump's first day in office about how they had been planning lawsuits against him for months. What we didn't know was the extent of it. And while some Democratic attorneys general have downplayed the extent to which they had been preparing for their nearly 100 lawsuits, others have been a bit more transparent, like Washington, like Maryland, where they did say, yes, this process did start months before President Trump won election and before he took office. We just didn't know that it would be this far in advance, April 2024, hypothetical lawsuits talking about hypothetical policies, really for a hypothetical president. Kamala Harris hadn't even announced her run for president by the time this all started.
And here we are a year and a half into the Trump administration 2.0, because he did eventually win in November of 24 and was in office in January of 25. And since then, we've had 100 different lawsuits against the Trump administration for a whole variety of different things. Seems like there's one at least every week, if not two. But before we talk about all the various states that are involved in all of this, Republicans banded together and they sued the Biden administration. But what makes this particular story different from what we saw, at least what we know of during the Biden administration?
I'm not aware of any lawsuits against the Obama administration or the Biden administration or even the first Trump administration where attorneys general were banding together this far in advance. I keep using the word hypothetical because there was no guarantee that Trump would be in office. There was no guarantee on which policies he would be implementing. Of course, he was making some promises along the campaign trail that might have worried Democratic attorneys general, but I'm not aware of any cases that were planned so far in advance. One of the people we interviewed for our story was the former Utah Attorney General, who was part of the lawsuit against the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare. That started, according to him, after Obamacare passed, not before, even though that was a big case that took many, many months, ended before the Supreme Court with a mixed victory and a mixed defeat.
Adam, let's get into which states were involved in all of this. And of course, as you mentioned, this kind of came to light in a batch of documents from Washington state, but you guys were able to quickly find some other documentation to show who was all involved in this. Let's take a look at this map that's in the story at thecentersquare.com. And you can see, states that have sued that are Republicans for different reasons, or states that have joined with other states but haven't commented on this document, this agreement, so to speak. But all those blue states, the color blue there, those are people who are attorneys general who are confirmed to have signed this agreement from back in April of 24.
So not all of them were April 2024. Many of them were. If you go onto our website, thecentersquare.com, you can see an interactive version of that same map. Hover over your state and get a little bit more context. Hawaii is the only state we're aware of that joined after President Trump won the election. The rest were either April, May, or June 2024, talking about those blue states. Now, there were 3 red states on there. Red meaning that there was one lawsuit filed by a Republican attorney general who did not join that common interest agreement back in April, May, or June of 2024. That was generally one case related to marijuana policy involving the Trump administration, but again, not planned so far in advance. Many of the lawsuits against, for example, the Biden administration were Republican lawsuits against the Biden administration, but there were some bipartisan cases and there were some Democratic cases. What we're finding throughout really this last 8 to 12 year history is that it's becoming so much more partisan on both sides of the aisle. The Republican Attorneys General Association and Democratic Attorneys General Association didn't even exist until the late 90s and early 2000s. The people I've interviewed said that it used to be much more common for when attorneys general did band together to file lawsuits, that it was usually more bipartisan. And now it's just becoming kind of a fundraising tool. A lot of these Democratic attorneys general will send out emails to their constituents asking for money, saying, look at the great work we're doing to fight against the Trump administration. We could use your help. It's happening on both sides of the aisle. It is a moneymaker, no matter who you ask, red or blue. And there are just so many lawsuits. The sheer number of it is staggering. There were more than 100 against the Biden administration in his 4 years. We're already at about 100 in under 2 years with Trump.
And it's pretty incredible, all the different states that were involved in this privileged and confidential common interest agreements that the EIU team with the Center Square found. And, we could spend 2 minutes reading off all of these states. But Adam, obviously, people can see that for themselves. Arizona, California, Hawaii, Illinois, Massachusetts, Vermont, Rhode Island. You can go through and read all of those. But get to that story at thecentersquare.com and hover over your state to be able to find out more details about this. But as you mentioned, this is something that Republicans have done in the past. Seems to have been even more so a higher rate with the Democrats opposing Trump. But you did talk, at least the team talked to the Maryland Attorney General, Anthony Brown. What did they have to tell you?
He was a little bit more transparent than some of the others who were downplaying the timing. He admitted, yes, we have been planning this for months and we needed to be prepared. We didn't want to be caught flat-footed if and when President Trump went into office. There's the exact quote. I was paraphrasing before, but we're pleased that we responded before January 2025. We talked through a host of possibilities. We wanted to be prepared not to get caught off guard. That's a big contrast with the Arizona Attorney General's office, where they said there was nothing significant about that April or May 2024 date. A lot of attorneys general just chose not to comment or to respond to our requests. The California Attorney General just held a press conference earlier this week. He's joined at least 82 lawsuits against the Trump administration, and he defined all of them as apolitical. You can judge for yourself whether you think that's true, because not a single Republican signed that document.
Yeah, it's fascinating that he held that news conference literally the day before this story was set to publish, as the team from the investigating unit was able to put this all together. And Rob Bonta holds a news conference and trying to tout he's saving taxpayer dollars, $200 billion, I think he said, because of the lawsuits he's been involved in, even though those tax-paying dollars are still federal tax-paying dollars coming to the state of California. But that's another story for another day, and I'm sure we're going to get a lot more out of this, Adam, because, as I said at the beginning, this is just one layer of the onion that's being peeled back to see how this works. But we've got this concept of attorney-client privilege that seems to be part of this story as well. Does that exist in this story? And if so, why?
Well, we certainly don't think so. And that's why my colleague in Washington is appealing so many of these pages upon pages upon pages of redacted documents, all withheld for attorney-client privilege. Our argument is that you can't really have attorney-client privilege when these are hypothetical lawsuits against a hypothetical policy instituted by a hypothetical president. You can't argue that 9 months before he takes office, in our opinion. But taking the politics out of all of it, look, we understand that attorneys general are going to put their spin on it, whether they are Democrats or Republicans. They're throwing out all these numbers, statistics, percentages about success rates, amounts of dollars that they claim to have been able to save. Or
yeah, $200+ billion, quote unquote, saved, but that's just recapturing federal taxpayer dollars. So
here's how I look at it. There have been a lot of lawsuits, over 100 now, a little less than 100, it's so hard to keep track of the exact number because not every attorney general joins every case. But when we talk about success rates, about 11 of them have been settled in favor of the plaintiffs, and about 4 have been closed in favor of the federal government. Now, obviously, 11 is a bigger number than 4, but so many of these cases have really yet to be decided, and they're still costing money.
Yeah, there's not been finality in a lot of these cases, but the various statistics will be prompted by whatever legislator or elected official wants to use that for their advantage. Adam, what is next with this story? I mean, I've seen, even the Illinois Attorney General, and they have these conferences where they all get together and talk about rights and responsibilities, and they tout their lawsuits. That's another taxpayer cost that you guys are thinking of looking into.
Yeah, well, there's a reason where this show is called The States, right? We cover all 50 of them. Our investigative team has been asking these questions with all 50 states, trying to figure out what communication existed. Are you going to give it up, or are you going to withhold it under some sort of attorney-client privilege? We continue to ask how much these lawsuits are costing the taxpayers. I have been on this show in the past to talk about this topic specifically as it relates to Colorado and their attorney general, who just secured the Democratic primary for his state. So we're looking at this case by case, state by state, trying to figure out the costs, trying to figure out where these lawsuits are going, and trying to figure out what was the strategy, especially now that we know that a document was signed as early as April 2024. Now, it would be pretty rare for a document to be signed on April 2024 without some sort of conversation even predating the drafting and the signing of that document. So at this point, we don't know how far back this goes. Does it go back to March, February? Does it go back to 2023?
Does it go back to 2016?
Well, they would probably tell you it goes back to what we learned from the first Trump administration. We knew, we had an idea of what he wanted to do in his first term in office. He talked about what he wanted to do in his second term in office. But again, we continue to use the word hypothetical because it didn't happen yet.
Adam Herbet's one of the investigative reporters on this story. Greatly appreciate your time, and people should get to the investigative page at thecentersquare.com and sign up for the newsletter so that you can get these and other stories in your inbox daily, only with The Center Square.